Complexity is our enemy. That includes complexity in all the technology we try to manage, all the complexity of our own products, services, and the value we try and offer the world, and complexity in all the interactive panels of glass that all our users carry around. If we don't learn to control the complexity, it will control us. In this section, we'll explore how to ensure all that complexity is functioning correctly and performing well for you and your users. Now that we've explored the realm of the doer, we're going to dive into a key aspect of the computer realm of HCI, which is functional integrity. Now, functional simply says that whatever you put in front of people, in front of your users, it works. It doesn't break or fail or crash. So this is actually an old realm. It's one of the oldest, but now we're dealing with a dramatic new importance here. And this is because of all the different types of new devices. It's really an explosion of devices and all those interactive panels of glass in the world today and all the ones that are inevitably coming in the future. Now, functional is exactly what it sounds like. Does all of your online stuff work? Does it break or does it perform well? Does it respond quickly? Does it respond as well or better than most of the other websites or apps or systems that your users are familiar with? Do the links work? Do the images load? For whatever functions or forms or widgets or code or whatever that I have in this online program, does it all operate on all devices? Can I play it on an iPhone just as well as on my laptop? Can I look at it on a tablet while walking to the library? And then can I use it on one of those old computers in the library? If what you present to your audience breaks, then you can bet that the user is gone. With the number of devices, and you can see here just some of the factors that play into this. If whatever you present to your audience breaks, then you're not going to keep them. With the number of devices that are out there in the world today, and with how fast the numbers of those devices is growing, this realm of functional could be more important than most of the other aspects of HCI that we teach here in this academy. Because if the online programs don't work, people are not going to use them, and they're not going to take whatever action you want them to take that's going to create whatever outcomes you're looking for. Now, when I started doing user research, a lot of years ago, we did everything on a desktop computer and Internet Explorer. Now, back then, 95% of what users did was on Internet Explorer on a desktop computer. But those days are long gone. And number of devices, the number of brands, Apple, Android, all the others that are out there, Mac, Windows, iOS, all the different browsers that people use, how many different types of Wi-Fi or hardwired access that they're using, all the different user settings, all the different user behaviors. All of that creates complexity that is just overwhelming to anyone who's trying to provide an effective user experience. So it's really important that we get our brains around this and make sure it works. And really, the only way to make sure that this functional requirement is met is to get real users to do real things on your online programs with their own devices. And the reason for that is you simply cannot simulate all of the possible combinations of devices and all the oddball user behaviors and configurations that may be out there in the world. You can't simulate those internally. You have to go out in the world and actually see how people have this stuff set up and what they're doing with them. And one of the best ways, in fact, really the only way to do this, is to test what we call in the wild. So what does this in the wild mean? So this simply means that you go find users wherever they are, in their homes, their offices, their shops, businesses, on the street, on the bus, on the train, or wherever they're likely to find and access your programs. And you assess the human-computer interactions with those users on their own devices, whether they're smartphones or tablets, laptops, whatever they might be. So bringing them into a controlled environment like a test lab simply doesn't work as well. No matter how thorough you are in your test lab and your quality assurance process, you will definitely discover new combinations of devices, software versions, and user behaviors in the wild that you won't be able to simulate in any kind of controlled environment. And it's important that in this process you include your key stakeholders, because they're going to want to see how whatever you've created is actually working. Their firsthand experience of what the users experience is going to be really important. So make sure you bring your colleagues along, and they're going to be less likely to insert roadblocks or resist whatever users are actually doing. So here are some of the approaches that we've found that work well with this whole process of testing in the wild. So you can test remotely, which means you set up a telephone session, connect with users on their devices. You can use WebEx or GoToMeeting or any one of a number of other screen sharing programs or software. So talk to the users and watch as they go through whatever they do with their little panels of glass and your programs. You can also physically go to where they are. You can meet them in their native environment. You can be with them face to face and do your HCI inquiry with them in person. And that includes meeting them on the street. We recently did an in-depth study for a new financial app. This was for a major bank. And we actually went out and met users at several Starbucks locations in and around Dallas, Texas. Now, it was a great way to see this app in action with real people in a real environment. And it was a lot of fun, too, actually seeing how people use this in the Starbucks locations. And while you're at it, do more than just test the interface. This is a great time to check on narratives and do interviews and dialogue and really learn what these people are about and learn who these doers are. How do they do what they do? Also, in some of these projects that we've done, in addition to doing users individually, we've actually invited them back to do group discussions. And this is a great way to get some dialogue going, to hear some stories, and do some brainstorming with them on what they need, what they want, and how they interact with all this stuff. And finally, there's a lot of ways to actually build in listening posts, automated ways to capture either user comments or actual data. And when we get into the section on data, if you haven't looked at that one already, you'll learn a lot more about how we can do a lot of these measures and really find out what's possible with these. So I could go on forever. I could set up a whole course on just on listening posts alone. So there's a lot there that's possible. So make sure to include that one in the process as well. Okay, so why is this functional test? Why is this functional verification, functional integrity important? Well, it should be really pretty obvious. Because if your stuff breaks, you're not going to get very far with your users. You may not get anywhere at all. And so no one's going to engage, no one's going to take the time to hassle with it if it's not functioning like it's supposed to. And again, it's really the number of devices, the number of users out there in the world is just incredibly complex, and it's growing all the time, and you just can't ignore all that complexity. You really got to get your processes and your brain wrapped around it. Like a lot of other aspects of HCI, what we teach here, functional problems are often invisible. You simply don't know what you don't know. Because of that, it's really critical to build in functional aspects into any HCI testing or study or research that you're going to do. And in most cases, it's easy to monitor, and it's pretty obvious to see when problems occur. So whatever other types of HCI work you're doing, always include functional as part of that. Always log bugs, failures, hiccups, any other flaky behavior that you're going to see, because those are the best times to uncover it, and that's the time when that invisible stuff's going to come out. So it's really important to build that into any HCI process that you're doing and just make sure you're constantly keeping track of that. And honestly, and I've seen this happen so many times, you can have a perfect website except for one or two glitches. And if a user finds that one glitch, it's going to ruin their confidence in everything. And you probably experienced this as well. It just raises doubt about the overall quality. One small error in content or functionality or performance immediately raises concerns about everything. No matter how high quality it is, no matter how relevant or how effective the whole experience is. And that trust and confidence is really fragile. And once you lose it, it's really hard to earn it back. You may never earn it back. So people's attention spans are too short, and there simply are far too many options out there if your stuff does not work. Here are just a few examples of functional integrity. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we run into this kind of stuff all the time. And it might be something to do with a device that they have. It might have something to do with the way the software is configured. It might be the way the content is loaded in the page. It may be the way the widgets and functions are operating. There's just all sorts of possibilities out there. You really can't even think of them all. You just got to build this in to what you're doing and make sure you're keeping track of it and fixing them as you locate them. So here's what you need to know. To provide thorough coverage of any possible technical risks, you need to keep an inventory of key features, functions. And that includes search widgets, social media plugins, contact forms, order forms, any special media types like video, audio, Flash, Java, PDF, etc. Know where your functions are, know where the failures might occur so you can test for them or so you can keep an eye on them. And be aware of all the users and what devices they have. And you can determine this via log files or analytics. That they're very good now at indicating not only what devices, but what browsers, what software they're using, etc. And there's also a lot of free tools out there that you can use to keep track of this. As far as broken links, load times, Google offers some site performance tools. You can keep track of lockups or any times that your programs stall. There's just so many tools out there. Most of them are free. It just doesn't make sense to not use them. It really is something you should be keeping track of pretty closely. There's this whole realm of more advanced tools and software as well. And again, there's a lot you can learn about those depending on what you're doing, apps or websites or social media or whatever functionality is. Make sure you're getting the right tools. Again, there's a lot out there and you can really make sure that you're covering all the corner cases with this. Another area that's really key is what's called responsive design. You probably have heard of this. If you haven't, you need to go investigate it. You can simply Google it. And this simply means that whatever user interface you've launched in the world, that user interface should be able to detect and respond to the screen size that your users happen to have. Now, for some systems that may not be important, because if you're building apps that are specifically for iPhone or Android, then that's obviously not going to be a problem. But if you're building a website where somebody might view it on a little tiny smartphone screen all the way up to a very large high resolution flat screen monitor, then you better make sure that your systems are responsive so that they're going to be able to know whatever device that they're being viewed on, and they can reformat and relay out all of the content. Also, Google will ding you. Google will now detect whether or not your devices are responsive and they work on mobile. And if they don't, there's some penalties, there's some risks associated with doing that. So make sure you keep track of that. And again, as we just talked about, the more you can observe people in the wild, the more you know how to do that and really see how things are happening in the real world with real users, real time, the better off you're going to be. So this, again, this is a game changer. Plus or minus, for positive or negative, for better or worse, this is going to have an effect on how much you're able to achieve your interactive goals. The power and the value of quality is beyond debate. Everybody expects it, but it doesn't happen automatically. So how much do you know about the integrity of your systems? How confident are you that you're not scaring away your customers because of functional problems? And do you know, how confident are you at this very moment about how well all your user-facing systems work with all the popular devices and some of the not so popular devices? If you're not familiar with that, then I'll bet that you may be having problems with some of those and they may be failing entirely, or at least not performing well, or not presenting the various corner cases and being able to display all of the content and all of the media that you're trying to put out there. Don't you want to remove the doubt that goes along with that of not really knowing for sure whether all those corner cases are working? I mean, and for yourself and for your users, it's really important that you understand that and figure that out. Finally, functional integrity, or the lack of it, has other risks too. Again, how many times have you read user or editorial reviews that contain those comments about, well, it's good, but, and the but is because something broke, or it didn't display right, or they weren't able to get it to work correctly? And how much business might you be losing because, again, there's something hidden, something invisible that's breaking for your users? So get the buts out of your public-facing systems and close those exits by verifying that your stuff works. It's just common sense.